Hello world. Today is a Blender Basics episode. Today I wanted to talk about the navigation. This thing is needed for people who just started learning very recently Blender. Very first thing they're going to how to say correctly, they're going to get involved is a navigation. Very basic stuff, but you still have to know a little something about it, especially if you use the armature, the bone system. So let's start with very simple thing. It's just a moving object around. It seems very simple, right? Just click here. Actually I have to check, did I turn on or not the visibility of the mouse. Yeah, visibility of the mouse movements are turned on, and probably I have to turn on screencast keys and maybe change color to the white so you can see what button I'm actually pressing, what keys I'm actually pressing on my keyboard. Okay, this seems very simple. It's a move operation. There is a shortcut for it. It's a G button. You click it and you grab it and move it around. If you press G and then select the axis key, for example Z axis, and when I move it, I can move it only on the Z axis. So this is moving. There is a rotation operator. Let's help you rotate object. And if you grab the axis, you can rotate it only on that axis. And there is a shortcut for it too. It's a R key on a keyboard. R. If you click R on any how to say it, like on a random view, it's a rotating object only related towards the view. But if you click R and then select it, axis, for example, again I'm gonna choose the axis. It's a rotate object only on the Z axis. And there is a scale operator. It's a scaling the object. There is a shortcut for it. It's a S key on the keyboard, and again you can select just after pressing S, if you select the key button which represents the axle. For example, right now I'm going to choose the Z axle. It's scaling object only on the Z axis. Okay, this is very basic navigation, like moving object around. Now there is a edit mode by pressing tab key on the keyboard. You can also select it here. There is actually a lot of modes: sculpt mode, vertex paint mode, but I'm going to talk about only these two because they are most commonly used: object mode and edit mode. So in the edit mode you can select objects vertices and move them using the same a shortcut G to move it, and for example if we choose the edge, R to rotate it, and S to scale it. So it should be relatively simple. Now, and you can select vertices and edges and faces. There is no shortcut for it, I'm afraid, yeah. Because on other programs there is a shortcuts to edit in the vertices, in the edges, and the faces. Very similarly, you can move faces, scale faces, and rotate faces. This is very basic stuff. Now, slightly more complex edit mode. I'm going to duplicate this cube in edit mode and move it up, scale it down, and I'm going to create this kind of rectangular object on top of the cube. Slightly more sophisticated, complex model. Just for example, I'm going to show you. I'm selecting all the faces of the geometry piece. Now this geometry piece is this cube and 4 rectangular objects on top of it. But if you go to the back to object mode, it's one object, one geometry piece. But in edit mode, because they are not welded, for example, just as example, I'm going to model this rectangular piece. This rectangular piece, it's kind of like one object with the whole cube. If I select its vertices, it's moving. It's the cube get it changing its geometry. What I'm trying to say, this rectangular object is one with the cube. And these rectangular objects, they are, even though in edit mode is a one piece, they are separated from this cube. This is important to know, especially at the very beginning. And if we change to the edit mode, it's still one geometry piece, but within edit mode, if you select just one face, you're gonna edit one face. If you select all the faces of the object, you select you editing this little object. And for example, we selected all these objects on top of it, geometry pieces, geometry elements of this cube. And when we move it, it's moved all together. When we rotate it, it's moved all together too, as a one piece. But what if we need to move them, all these 4 objects, but not as a one object, but on each individual center? Excuse me, I'm gonna show you what I mean. If you change this little icon from this, like one point selected on the center, to individual regions. Now, if we're moving it, nothing really changing. They're all of them moving at the same time. But when we actually try to rotate them, they're all being rotated on each individual center, each individual origin. So it could be very helpful with some tasks during 3D modeling. So, and same thing with the scale. In the scale, for example, if we get back to the median point, if we try to scale it, they're kind of getting scaled from the center point. And if we selected just these two, they're being scaled from this central point. So, but if we if we need them to be scaled, each individual part simultaneously, but in a similar matter, we have to select individual regions. So that's one of the basics navigation things, which could be useful. There is another thing, there is a word region, what's it, the cursor, this little circle with a red and white selected. If we, for example, selected this vertices, one vertex on the side of it, on the side of the cube, and by clicking Shift S, we can move cursor to selected. So now that red and white square is moved here, cursor moved here. Only Blender has it, because other programs I never seen that element before, editing element, this cursor thing. And now if we select the different icon, 3D cursor, yeah, it's called 3D cursor. And now if we select these 4 elements, and again, if we're just moving it, nothing really changing, just, yeah, they all move together at the same time. But if we try to scale it now, those in the pieces are getting scaled as one object, and from this 3D cursor point. And same thing with the rotation too. So this is how it works. And same thing if you wanna select all of them. Now probably I have to explain another very important thing. For example, if you move object, probably we have to open this little tab item where you can see transformation. Right now this cube is located on the center of the world, but 1 meter up. If you can see this red dot, it's the center of this object. I'm going to return to the median point. It's the center of this object, this geometry cube. And if we move it around, you can see how it's changed its location relative to the center of the world. These two axles, green is y axis, and red it's a x axis, and there is a one, it's a z, but it's invisible now. So if we return it back to the central point, only 1 meter above, if we move this object in an edit mode, for example right here, because that red button stay it didn't its position, it's a basically center of this cube, because we move it in edit mode, actual object, it didn't move. You see, location is still 1 meter above the center of the world, and if we're just trying to move it, nothing really changes. It's moving similarly. It's just weird because if you select the object, actual arrows appears on the red dot. That's only difference basically. But if you rotate it, it's being rotated around this center of the object. This happens a lot if you're importing model from different programs, because all the positioning could be different. It could be like all the origins of the geometry could be exactly on the center or all over the places. It could be sometimes very frustrating. So if, to move origin to the center of the geometry, you can go to the object, set origin, and origin to geometry, and it's automatically selecting moving the center of the origin, set origin to a geometry relative to amount of points, because as you can see, it's not here, it's here, because it's considers all the points, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not really a programmer, I don't know for sure. And because its origin is moved, you see location is changed to location now is here, x is a minus 2.4 meter, and you can always return object to exact center of the world just by put 0 at all axes, and now we return it to exact center. There is a simpler way to do it. It's just as you can see now as a 3D cursor at the random place. By pressing Shift S keys, you can move cursor to the world origin, to the exact center. And next move is going to be again the same command, Shift S, and you choose selected to cursor. It means selected object is going to move to the cursor, and we return it to exact world origin, exact 0 position on the X, Y, Z axis. So this is basic navigation, and it's only object mode and edit mode. There is other modes, sculpt mode, vertex paint, weight paint, texture paint. I don't really know them, but as I know, everyone uses just these two, almost everybody, object mode and edit mode. This is relatively simple. The another thing I want to show you just a glimpse of it, like a very little part of it. It's bone system. Maybe for a bone system I need entirely different video, but just how to say it, again, to show you very basics of the bone system. Now let's add armature to this scene. Now it's a single bone. We create bone and the actual object, geometry object, they are a little bit different from each other. And bone system, it has different edit, just 3 modes: edit mode and pose mode. And earlier, before I knew, to me it was a little bit confusing why they have 3 modes: object mode, edit mode, and pose mode. It's still kind of slightly confusing because it's called pose mode, and pose mode I always assume it was static. That means because pose, it means something static. I think should be called animation mode, because on a pose mode you actually animate object. You put animation keys and do animation. So that's why it was a little bit confusing personally to me, and still slightly confusing. So we created a bone, just one single bone, and on the object mode you can grab it and move it and scale it and rotate it like a regular object geometry piece. But it's not really recommended, especially for animation. Again, animation has to be going on in a pose mode, animation of the bones. Okay, and edit mode, it's actual positioning of the bones. Like if you have a character, you put this bone, for example, as a little arm, like this, and by pressing E key on the keyboard, just extruding and creating another bone, and kind of automatically creating a bone system, because usually bones are attached to each other like in this manner, but in Blender it's bones, especially in mechanical objects, they can be not attached to each other. They can stay like this, like far away from each other, and it's probably too complicated for beginners to explain right now. But this is what I wanted to tell you. Edit mode, you just using for positioning bones on a like character on or your geometry piece. And pose mode, you actually doing animation, and what's they call it, you put animation keys and do actual animation. Just as example, I'm going to put a little animation on a rotation. Insert single keyframe, move it to 30 frames, rotate it, and insert another single keyframe. And now we created very simple animation. This pose mode, it is animation mode. Please memorize that, because personally to me, pose mode, it always meant static mode, and I was trying to basically to edit actual bones in this pose mode. I didn't know the difference at the beginning. I should have watched more YouTube videos first. So next time, if you don't know something, try to Google it and watch your YouTube videos or some tutorials to understand what's going on. My system of how I'm learning, it's very random and not systematic at all. I just again, I get involved with the project, with the program, and try to push all the buttons, press all the keys, try all the tabs, and that's how I learn. And it's very non-systematic and probably not right way to learn stuff. So that was I was trying to say. And I wouldn't recommend you to if you're like very early stage of learning Blender, just don't touch bones yet. Bones in Blender is really complicated things, and you really have to do it a lot, I think, too, because well, I haven't done it for a while now, not for a while, just a couple days, and I already keep forgetting the things in it, especially that what's they call it, the inverse kinematics. This is complicated thing too. The inverse kinematics. So for beginners, I wouldn't recommend you to first try to do, but young people are really advanced now. They're learning stuff very fast and very quickly. Some of the things they do are just absolutely awesome and fantastic. Maybe because I'm getting old, I'm losing ability. Well, I'm not that old yet, but to me, I really noticed that it's very difficult to learn those new stuff. But I'm always trying. I like learning. So that was very basic. And look how it's changing its position on edit mode. If you go to the back to edit mode, it's change. It's get back to original where we were placing just bones. So be careful with that. At the beginning it was very confusing to me why it is like that, and it's still a little bit confusing. It's not easy. So for today, I think this is it. And if you like it, like it. If you don't like it, you can always leave a mean comment on the comment section below. Till next time, bye bye.